most improved team in your mind?
It's the Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders said, you know what? We got us one in quarterback Jaden Daniels. And they understand that he's on the rookie contract. And when his contract come up, they're going to have to break the bank. So before we get there, let's go add pieces to protect him. Let's give him another weapon offensively. And then on the defensive side of the ball, let's go make some changes there in order to be better, to give this kid some support when we get back to the NFC Championship.
Okay. Do you believe the Commanders have closed the gap on the Eagles?
Okay. Let me be clear. Let me be 100% upfront and honest about this. I am an Eagles fan. That does not mean I have blinders on and I am not able to see, the potential of this Washington Commanders team. I'll admit, they can be a force to be reckoned with. They made it to the freaking NFC Championship, game last year. And while we did blow them out, there were some, circumstances and, things that, bounced in our favor as far as, the turnover margin. And but we did that to every team, and we played in the playoffs. Literally every freaking team that we played, bar none, we were turning the ball over. So that's just a thing we had going. We were in the groove and whatnot. But, Jaden Daniels played pretty well that game. So the guys around him, were playing like rookies. They were playing, making, mistakes and such and putting him behind, the 8 ball and, handicapping them in their efforts. But that being said, they have, a lot to potentially build off of this year. And, they made some strides to improve themselves, but you look at free agency, they lost people, they gained people, they resigned people. A lot is there to be made of that, but it's a big mix of different things because there's a difference between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders. It's big brother, little brother right now for a good reason. Experience. They have tasted glory. They tasted success. But how do you build up upon that and have that segue into the next year? Because a lot of things are going to be thrown at them. Success. How does that hit you? And yes, you have a head coach who has built that environment, that culture. Now he has to take that next step and to propagate it, to let it fester and culminate, and cultivate an environment of that, winning, breed winning, not just dealing with the flash in the pan success, but stretching out over the course of years, building their proper program. And a lot comes with that, man, because they're in the spotlight right now. They're the media darling, so to speak. And, a lot of people are, you're touting them, and they might be reading the press clippings. And I believe they have some humble guys, there. Starting with, Jaden Daniels. And, yes, he's going to, be tested and such. But how are you propping up him? How are you, building around him? And it's a good start. The GM, it was a good reset. They came in fresh-faced and built, a 12-win program, off of the backs of failure, dealing with a lot, and just the weight of the past of that franchise hanging over his shoulders, up until that, this year they hadn't been to the NFC Championship, similar to the Cowboys in 30 plus years, and broke through that ceiling. And some illogical fans will look at that and say, hey, next step is Super Bowl. Whoa. Next step is to have sustained success, man. That's what you're trying to build toward, because a lot could go wrong. Jaden Daniels is stepping into his second year. Historically speaking, that's when teams, game plan for you, figure you out. Yes, you were, on a roll, had a historic rookie season, one of the best we've seen in recent years. But we've seen this before. And yeah, it might not have been to that degree, but remember Robert Griffin III? He came in and took the league by storm. And yes, he got injured. He's healthy coming into this offseason. Jaden Daniels is. But, he was touted to be the next great, quarterback. and he went off the rails. I don't believe Jaden Daniels is that player. I don't believe Jaden Daniels is that guy. I believe they have more built around him to have that sustained success. That being said, people game plan for you. People they set out to destroy you. Look what Bill Belichick had did with a year of planning. Not a year, off season of planning towards Jalen Hurts. The season opener. I think it was 2023. He stalled him. And that's what teams look to do when you're hot. When when you're talented, when you're a young player, they game plan to take away what you do well. So that same year, you're not going to be able to go back to the well with the same things and be able to use things that caught people by surprise. You aren't catching anybody off guard this year, Jaden Daniels. You are going to have to not just work at your craft, improve, get better, figure out your weaknesses, because they have earmarked those. They got you on film. They got a full season of tape on you, and it's not no longer in season. People say, no, people couldn't stop him last year. That was when people were working with week to week tape. They had to get on to the next opponent. These guys are gonna spend the offseason breaking down what you do well, what you struggle with, idiosyncrasies syncrasies that you didn't even know you had. They're going to figure you out. So how do you respond to that, and how do they help him out in that regard? So now they went out and got guys. I like the upgrade of Laramie Tunsil down at left tackle, a top 10 left tackle. Most like I'll put him top 5 in the league. Why the Texans were so willingly able to sell him, willing to sell him off, especially when their quarterback needs protection, is a question in and of itself. But yeah, man, he gives that line a great a great starter at that pivotal position, left tackle. So that's an upgrade. But where did they go with the other guys? They got Coleman. He was there in the lineup, and I forget another backup guy. Potential backup and swing now, but it was a starter for them. I think he might have been a backup as well. But that strengthens their line. But they still have holes. They have to protect him. Sam Cosmi coming off the ACL surgery. He's not going to be ready. So we were getting after him in the AFC Championship game. We were in his face. So you gotta shore up the line and put better protection around him. The running back position can be upgraded. Brian Robinson, he's a decent guy, hard-nosed runner, but they could have a more steady hand there and a more versatile guy. Receiver, I don't believe. This is just me, and we'll see. Maybe he can get back to being somewhat of the player that he was. I don't look at Deebo Samuel as an extreme upgrade. I would say he might be slight, and even that can he stay healthy? Is he motivated? Is he gonna bitch, whine, and moan being in the offense and not getting his touches? And he doesn't run routes. On the route running front, they didn't upgrade. He's a player in space that you like, but Terry McLaurin still is the number one guy, and I don't see him being as explosive as he used to be, and he capped out. He didn't have, outside of that 1 year, the 1,300-yard year, I believe, he hasn't really stood out like that. And even his specialty, being a Swiss Army knife, coming into the backfield, hasn't shown that. He was more of a, I don't even want to say a liability towards the offense, but just look more jaggish, just another guy. So I'd be interested to see, how he shows up this offseason. And I'm more worried about the volatileness of that locker room, because last year worked out bringing in mercenaries, bringing in free agents, and because, you didn't know what you had, and they gelled around that young guy. But then this is a crucial offseason, and he's a second-year player. Putting guys like Deebo Samuels, who's choking his guys, the sidelines, around the quarterback, a young, impressionable guy, I'd be a little bit wary doing that. You know what I'm saying? Like, like I said, he had a seal in his chest, but I would not call that man a captain. I would not see that man as a captain. You know what I'm saying? As great as Jalen Carter is, and I'm not throwing any shade at him. I don't see him as being a captain, at least in the interim right now. He has a lot of growing up to do and a lot of maturing to do. And yet he plays hard on the field, but some of the things he does sometimes can, they could be costly to our team if he didn't have guys to rein him in that locker room. So, that's a dangerous element, adding in too many guys. And we did that as the Eagles in 2023, and you saw what happened. The locker room kind of imploded, and as far as guys just playing for themselves, being like me about my stats, and we didn't have the cohesiveness. Too many guys that were coming in from the outside and then didn't give a damn about the Eagles' way. You know what I'm saying? It was my way, and we showed them the highway at the end of the season. But yeah, I'm worried. I would say I'd be worried about that. But I hope it implodes as an Eagles fan. But that's always something to be wary of. The culture you're setting, because the guys you have in the locker room, the guys who you're paying and the premiums and who you're showing the dollars and cents are going to be the guys who set the culture in the locker room when the coaches only haven't reached about this far. Like Javon Kinlaw, they overpay for him, so that's the thing. The difference between them and us, the Eagles, homegrown talent. We've identified core players and bringing them in. And you guys are still building, still young, and you have to go out and pay guys because you have failed in those areas, and you guys have identified the quarterback. Okay, you got Larry Tussle, you got what's your boy name, Terry McLaurin, you got Zerzon Newton. You don't know what it's gonna be, but you have Jonathan Allen's running mate on the defensive line, D tackle. But you have those guys. But other than that, who can you hang your hat on? You know what I'm saying? Like on the Eagles team, offense, defense, O-line, receivers, running back, D-line, linebackers, secondary. You have standouts. You have stars. You have productive reserves. We have a little bit of everything, but core identity guys. But Washington Commanders are still building towards that. So not just Jaden Daniels, those guys have to take a step forward too. And you got guys, you signed. That's cool, but they could be on the decline. You don't know what Bobby Wagner's going to bring this year. If he's going to take a step back, it's going to be and yeah, like knowledge, instincts, stuff like that can carry you, but you reach a ceiling at some point. Zach Ertz, there's no guarantee that he's going to have the season that he had this past year. You know what I'm saying? Even though he says, he's had more fun than he's had in recent years. And, he's inspired. Cool. But, equal, does that equal an equivalent year? That is yet to be seen. So a lot of, variables thrown into the mix, and we have no idea what they're going to, be. And, typically, teams having success is year to year. And until you prove that you can be that year in and year out, you don't know. Because they could take a step back, this year. And the roster, they got to improve to some degree. The defense was a liability. And we still haven't filled those holes. Like I said, they brought in, some free agents, but they need to hit on the draft. They need, they need those guys to come in and be productive. And that puts a lot of pressure on those, that part of the roster. And you need the guys, in the locker room to lead them and pull them along. The coaches to, to stay on them and develop that talent. That has to be seen. We saw them bring in talent, and coach them up for 1 year. Now let's see them do it again, and that's the $1 million question. So, there's a lot of issues, a lot of things that this team could look at, but, can they rise to the challenge? So now they're a bit of the hunted. People aren't going to, like I said earlier, be caught up by surprise. They're going to sneak up on people. People are going to be watching out for it, checking them. And, there's going to be a lot of things that test their maturity, their mettle, because they don't have it. They're a young team. They're, a team that, has cycled in a lot of people in and out. So, who is the heart of that team? Yeah, you got, the few. But who else are they adding to those ranks? And I'll be interested to see as a division rival. But, hey, man, I love to do this and break down more other teams because, I love the Eagles, but, hey, I'm watching and I'm wearing because I've got my eye on you. But anyways, even though we're talking about the Commanders, it's always the Eagles all the time. You know, I did this just as, you know, a purveyor, just to keep my eye on a division rival. So, like I said, I love making videos with the Eagles. Hey, the rivals too when it fits my fancy. But we'll get out of here. Chunk and Deuces officially. But as always, it's fly, Eagles, fly, and let's motherfucking go. Like, comment, share, and subscribe if you like. Thanks for watching. Check me out at Cintron, Cintron Anime, Cintron Life, or Cintron Laughs, or other social media.